When you show up to a trauma scene, your most important job is to figure out what injuries you can't see. The clock is already ticking, and to save a life, there's one skill you need more than anything else. Welcome to Breakdown. At any trauma scene, what you see right in front of you is really only half the story. The broken bones, the bleeding, that's the obvious stuff. But the real life threats, the things that are going to kill your patient, those are often totally invisible. So today, we're going to learn how to read the unseen. And this right here, this is the key. It's called the index of suspicion. Now, this isn't some fancy piece of gear you carry in your bag. It's a mindset. It's your ability to look at, say, the twisted metal of a car or how high someone fell from, and basically translate that into a mental map of what could be busted up on the inside. It is, without a doubt, your most important tool. So the big question is, how do you actually develop this skill, right? How do you get that kind of, X-ray vision that can literally be the difference between life and death? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down today. We're going to dive into the forces at play so you can learn to read any trauma scene like a book. And believe it or not, it all starts with a little bit of physics. See, traumatic injury isn't just random bad luck. Nope, it's the direct result of physical forces hitting the body. So if you want to predict the injury, you first have to understand the force that caused it in the first place. And that force is energy. The kind of energy we're really focused on here is kinetic energy, the energy of a moving object. And here's the core principle you have to get. Energy is never, ever destroyed. It's only transferred or converted into something else. So when a car smacks into a tree, all that kinetic energy doesn't just vanish into thin air. It gets converted into the work of, crushing the front end of the car and, unfortunately, injuring your patient. Okay, so here's the formula that kind of governs everything we're talking about. And don't worry, I'm not going to make you do calculus on the side of the highway, but understanding the relationship between these parts is absolutely vital for building that index of suspicion. And I want you to pay really close attention to that tiny little squared symbol right there next to velocity. That's the secret sauce. So what does that little squared symbol mean? Well, here's the bottom line. Speed is times way more important than weight when it comes to causing damage. Think about it. If you double the mass, like you swap a car for a big truck, you double the energy. Okay, that's bad. But if you double the speed, you quadruple the energy that's available to hurt someone 4 times. This is exactly why a high-speed crash or a high-velocity bullet is just so incredibly devastating. All right, let's take all this physics stuff and apply it to the most common trauma you're going to run into, a car crash. This is the perfect place to see that energy transfer happen in a really clear step-by-step way. You see, every single crash is actually 3 different collisions happening one after another. So first, you have the car hitting something, another car, a pole, whatever. The amount of damage to the car itself gives you a clue about how much energy we're dealing with. Then collision number 2, the person inside who's still flying forward at the car's original speed slams into the interior. We're talking dashboard, steering wheel, windshield. This is what causes all the obvious stuff you can see. But that third collision, that's the real killer. In this slide, man, it just nails the whole point of what we're talking about. As the person's body comes to a dead stop, their internal organs are still moving. They keep going, and they slam into the inside of the body, the brain against the skull, the heart and aorta against the chest wall. This is how you get a bruised brain, a torn aorta, or a shredded spleen. These are the deadly injuries that you will never, ever see from the outside. Okay, so now we've got the basic principles down, right? The physics of energy, the 3 collision concept. So let's take that thinking and start applying it to a few different types of trauma you're going to see out there in the field. Basically, trauma gets broken down into 2 main buckets. You've got blunt trauma, think car crashes, big falls, where the skin isn't actually broken. In these cases, your index of suspicion for what's going on inside has to be through the roof. Then you have penetrating trauma, gunshots, stabbings. Here you've got an obvious hole, but the real problem is that the path of destruction deep inside can be totally unpredictable and way worse than that little hole suggests. So let's run through a few high-risk scenarios. With falls, a good rule of thumb is that anything over 20 feet is considered really significant. For penetrating trauma, we're back to our old friend, velocity. Speed is everything. A high-speed bullet doesn't just poke a neat little hole, it creates this massive temporary cavity from a huge pressure wave that expands outward. That's called cavitation, and it just obliterates tissue way beyond the bullet's actual path. And then you have blast injuries, where the first wave of damage comes from that same invisible force. A pressure wave so powerful it can literally rupture organs like your lungs or eardrums without even touching you. Man, a blast is just the ultimate example of multi-system trauma. It's a total mess. First, you've got the primary injury, which is from the pressure wave itself. Then, secondary injuries from all the flying crap, the shrapnel. Third, you've got tertiary injuries, which happen when the patient themselves gets picked up and thrown against something. And if that's not enough, you have quaternary injuries, stuff like burns or breathing in toxic fumes. A scene like this, it demands the absolute highest index of suspicion you can possibly have. Okay, so you've sized up the scene. You've used that awesome index of suspicion to make a mental list of all the potential unseen injuries. Great. But now the focus has to shift. What do you actually do with that information when every single second is ticking away? This is what we call the platinum 10 minutes. For a really critical trauma patient, the goal is to get them assessed, packaged up, and on the way to the hospital in 10 minutes, or less. Now, why so fast? Simple. The only thing that's truly going to fix severe internal bleeding is a surgeon in an operating room. You can't do surgery in the back of an ambulance. Your one and only job is to get them to the surgeons and to do it fast. So what are you actually doing in those precious 10 minutes? Well, first things first, you make sure the scene is safe for you. Then you follow the golden principles. Your absolute number one, top of the list priority is controlling any major hemorrhage. You got to stop the big bleeds. Then you move on to airway and breathing. After that, you treat for shock, and a big part of that is just keeping your patient warm. And then you get them moving rapidly to the right hospital. That's the mission, plain and simple. So, you see how it all comes full circle? Reading the mechanism of injury, it's not just some academic exercise you do to pass a test. It is the first critical step in the entire chain of survival. It's what tells you what to worry about. It informs every single decision you make in those platinum 10 minutes. It's what lets you see the unseen and then act on it. So now you have the tools. The only question left is, what's your next move?